Hi guys, Mrs. Joyce here with another fun poem. This week we are looking at Poppies by Jane Weir. So as usual, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the context. We're going to look at the poem as a whole on the page, and then once we've done that, we're going to go through it line by line so we understand what it's on about, and then we'll look at the structure as a whole. So, Poppies is a modern poem. It was written around about 2009. Jane Weir, the poet, is an Anglo-Italian poet, and she was actually commissioned by Carol Ann Duffy of War Photographer fame to write a poem as part of an anthology of poems around the Gulf War and the Iraq Inquiry. So she was asked to write a war poem, and this particular poem she wrote, although it was then, Jane Weir has said that she very deliberately wanted to make it non-specific to a specific war. It's about war in general rather than a specific conflict. Now, interesting thing about Jane Weir, she's not just a poet. She's also a textiles artist, okay? So she works with fabric. She designs things, she creates things. So there's a lot of terminology in here that you are going to come across and you're going to be like, I don't really get that. And that's because a lot of it is about dressmaking. Now, I did try and go online to the Tube of You and find a video about it, but I'm going to be honest, I would have needed to link in about 12 different videos. So what I suggest you do is actually go in and look for the specific things yourselves, because each one of them, there's like how to do this, how to do that, because YouTube's full of how-to tutorials. And it's well worth you looking at these just to understand exactly what's going on in the poem. Okay, so I'm going to read the poem to you now, and I'll just very briefly, before I read it out to you, I'm going to pull the camera up so you can see what it looks like on the page. So the shape of the poem on the page, it looks quite symmetrical, doesn't it? So we've got a short stanza, a longer stanza, a longer stanza, and a short stanza at the end. So when we think about that shape on the page, we could look at the way almost the first half mirrors the second half, perhaps, and think about how that ties in with the story of the poem. Okay, so Poppies. 3 days before Armistice Sunday, and poppies had already been placed on individual war graves. Before you left, I pinned one onto your lapel. Crimped petals, spasms of paper red, disrupting a blockade of yellow bias binding around your blazer. Cellotape bandaged around my hand, I rounded up as many white cat hairs as I could, smoothed down your shirt's upturned collar, steeled the softening of my face. I wanted to graze my nose across the tip of your nose, play at being Eskimos like we did when you were little. I resisted the impulse to run my fingers through the gelled blackthorns of your hair. All my words flattened, rolled, turned into felt. Slowly melting, I was brave as I walked with you to the front door. Threw it open, the world overflowing like a treasure chest. A split second and you were away, intoxicated. After you'd gone, I went into your bedroom and released a songbird from its cage. Later, a single dove flew from the pear tree, and this is where it has led me. Skirting the churchyard walls, my stomach busy making tucks, darts, pleats, hatless without a winter coat or reinforcements of scarf, gloves. On reaching the top of the hill, I traced the inscriptions on the war memorial, leaned against it like a wishbone. The dove pulled freely against the sky, an ornamental stitch. I listened, hoping to hear your playground voice catching on the wind. Okay, so if we go back up to the top and we have a look at the title. So first of all, we've got the word poppies as the title. Now, we know the relevance of the word poppies. Okay, we know that they're linked to Remembrance Day. Another poem you guys can look up is In Flanders Fields by John McCrae, because that's where that image comes from. Hope I spell his name right. Now, that particular poem, that's where we come across the idea of don't forget about us. And I think that line there, this poem really, really links to memory. Now, when we think about the idea of memory with this poem, we can also think about how it links to other poems, such as Exposure, which is based upon real life experience, Bayonet Charge, which is about the experiences of the poet's father, or Kamikaze, which is looking at the memories of a woman of her kamikaze pilot father. Memory is a huge thing here. You can even look at War Photographer with this. I mean, obviously you've got the Carol Ann Duffy link, but you've also got that idea of the fact that the photographs are memories of what was happening. So that's quite an interesting one to look at. And if you did get a question on memory in the exam, this would be a really good one to look at. So let's have a look at it stanza by stanza. 3 days before Armistice Sunday, and poppies had already been placed on individual war graves. Before you left, I pinned one onto your lapel, crimped petals, spasms of paper red, disrupting a blockade of yellow bias binding around your blazer. Okay, so we begin with a very, very specific time reference. Okay, the Sunday before Remembrance Day. Okay, so very specific time. And that, again, it links to that idea of memory, because when we think about timing and times, we often come up with specific points. So the week after half term, it's a very specific point in time, very specific time reference here. And she links it to this image. Poppies had already been placed on individual war graves. Now, we've got the idea of the poppies here already. Okay, so we're talking about remembrance. But it's individual war graves, okay? So, separate people on their own. Okay, it's that idea of being very personal. When you think about putting poppies on war graves, we tend to think more not so much war graves as war memorials, where there are vast lists of names where people have been memorialised. But the individual war graves, people tend to leave those be because they are personal to the people who have lost those soldiers. So when we think about this, and she links that there, it could possibly suggest that she is a part of a soldiering community. There are plenty of people whose fathers have been in the army, and then they are in the army, and then their sons are in the army, and then their grandsons are in the army, because it does create a community. So it's quite an interesting thing to realise exactly how personal this is. Now, obviously, as we come through the poem, we find that the speaker is a mother. And we get little hints of that. And one of the first things here is here. Before you left, I pinned one onto your lapel. Crimped petals, spasms of paper red. Now, at this point, it could actually be a wife and her husband or partner. Okay, I pinned one onto your lapel. It's a very personal thing to do. You know, when you think about people pinning flowers to someone, it's very often almost like an image of a wedding day. You know, the mother of the groom puts the flower on his lapel before he goes down to a wedding. So it's quite an interesting image. And then we've got lapel. Okay, now the lapel is the edge of your jacket, of your blazer, and we later on find out it is a blazer, which suggests that he's in quite formal clothing. Okay, So we'll kind of come back to that clothing in a minute. Spasms of paper red disrupting a blockade of yellow bias around your blazer. Now, there's a couple of things there that you might be confused by, okay? First of all, yellow bias binding. We're going to come back to the spasms of paper red, don't worry. Okay, so bias binding, okay, it's a dressmaking term. And it's edging. It's usually a different colour. Oh God, I can't write today. Different, yes, colour. And it's normally put round the edge of a blazer or a coat, either to make it stand out or to hide rough edges. But it's usually on higher ranking uniforms. So what we've got here is we've got a person who is quite possibly high ranking, but he's still being treated in this way by his mother. Now, spasms of paper red, as I said, I wanted to go back to that. Obviously, paper red, we've got that idea of it being the poppy. But when we think of the word spasm, spasm and red together become quite a violent image, because a spasm is what happens when your body is injured. Okay? Because even though this is quite a sweet scene, this idea of her getting him ready, possibly to go to church in his uniform, you know, with his poppy on his lapel and looking after him, we've got this spasm of paper red. It doesn't fit with the rest of his uniform. It sticks out and it jars. And this image jars with the idea of this spasm. It's the idea of being injured, being shot maybe. When you're, you know, if you get shot, if you've ever watched a film where someone's shot, they spasm backwards, okay? And then we've got the word disrupting as well. Again, it's that idea of the fact that it's not quite meant to be there. Disrupting a blockade. Now, a blockade's quite an interesting one, because when we think of blockades, we often think of places we're not allowed to go to. And it's actually quite a military thing. So we've got two types of terminology here. We've got these dressmaking terms, which you could link to domesticity, to the housework, homeliness. And then you've got the military terminology here, which is obviously linked to the military, surprisingly enough. Okay, and then we get straight into this second stanza. Okay, sellotape bandaged around my hand. I rounded up as many white cat hairs as I could, smoothed down your shirt's upturned collar. Okay, so this again is that domesticity, but it's bandaged. Okay, again, linking to injury. I don't know whether you've ever seen anybody do this, but you know what a lint roller is, I'm hoping. It's something that you, like sticky stuff that you put, that you roll down clothes to take hairs or bits of muck off of them, you know, dried dust and stuff. But if you haven't got one of them, you can do it with sellotape, and that's what she's doing, which again is this domesticity, homeliness, domestic. I rounded up as many white cat hairs as I could, smoothed down your shirt's upturned collar. So this is a very, very loving image. Okay, she's getting him ready. But we don't know for what as yet. And then we get this bit here, steeled the softening of my face. If you steel yourself for something, you try and stop it, okay? And when you think about the softening of her face, basically she's trying not to cry. She doesn't want to cry. So up until this point, we've had this quite positive image of her getting him ready to do something important. There's hints of danger, hints of it not being the nice image that we think it is, and then we get this bit, steal the softening of my face. So despite the fact she's looking after him and that she's getting him ready for something important, she doesn't want him to go. And what she wants to do, I wanted to graze my nose across the tip of your nose, play at being Eskimos like we did when you were little. And this is where we realise that we're looking at a mother. This is a mother talking to her son. Or talking about her son. It's all first person. And we've got this kind of weird sort of complex past tense thing going on right the way through. Okay. I resisted the impulse to run my fingers through the gelled black thorns of your hair. Now, this is where the time starts to get a little bit funny, because earlier on up here we've got this military uniform which suggests that he's quite high ranking, but if he's got gelled black thorns of hair, that suggests he's quite young. So perhaps her memories are starting to bleed into each other, blend in. Yeah, nobody has a Sonic the Hedgehog hairstyle when they're in their 40s, you know. And you'll notice as the poem goes that there is this time shifting around. It's all very kind of soft, fuzzy. The timelines aren't accurate. I mean, she's just jumped backwards to where playing at being Eskimos. I mean, it's a very sort of cute, childish thing. I mean, I do this with my son all the time. He thinks it's dead cute, and then he tries to lick my face because, you know, he's my son. But it's a really cute image. Okay. And then we've got black thorns in the hair. Now, when we think of thorns in the hair, what we have to think about here is the possibility of this maybe being a biblical allusion. So when we think of thorns in hair, we could think of thorn of crowns, crown of thorns even. God, you can tell how well I'm doing. And possibly the idea of sacrifice. Okay. Remember, don't let us be forgotten. Don't forget our sacrifice. Poppies. Part of the poppies is the remembrance, but the other part is recognising the sacrifice that people made. All my words flattened, rolled, turned into felt. Okay, so I'm hoping that you will know that felt is a fabric. But felt is a very interesting fabric, because it's created by taking wool and basically smashing it to pieces. So instead of being quite fine, it's all mushy and all over the place, which is why she says flattened, rolled. And, you know, these they're not graphic, but they are still quite violent verbs when you think about flattening something. And when we think about time being quite sort of like fuzzy, felt is fuzzy. It's very delicate as well. It's really easy to break felt. You have to reinforce it. Again, have a look online. There's plenty of stuff online on how to make felt animals and things like that, because it's, you know, felting is quite an interesting craft, and it's worthwhile looking at this because that's what she's talking about here. Again, it's more of that domestic imagery though. Okay, so we've had a short stanza and we've had our long stanza. And now we're going to move into the next stanza. So this one continues the story. So the first stanza we had her talking about getting him ready to go out. Then she starts talking a little bit more about remembering about how he was when he was a child. And then we go into this one. So we have the enjambment turned into felt, slowly melting. So we need to think about why that enjambment is there. Okay? And obviously this is just my personal feeling, but I think when you consider she's trying to stop herself from crying, I actually think that's almost like her taking a deep breath in, because she goes in from slowly melting to I was brave. Okay? So she's being brave. I was brave as I walked with you to the front door, threw it open, the world overflowing like a treasure chest. Now that's quite interesting. First of all, I was brave. It's interesting how bravery is something we associate with soldiers. But this is a civilian being brave. Okay? She's hiding. She's brave because she's hiding how she's feeling. You know, she's emotional. And it's a very feminine thing to say as well, being brave, hiding your emotions. Because women are supposed to be emotional, but when they've got men around them, they're supposed to hide their emotions, which I find is quite an interesting image here. Because her son is going away to join the army, and she is terrified for him. And that comes through here. I walked with you to the front door, threw it open, the world overflowing like a treasure chest. So in front of him, to him, it's like a treasure chest. Okay, he's excited. Okay, she's terrified, he's excited. That simile there, he's just like, what's in store? Really emphasises his excitement, really. I can't think of another word for it. He's going on an adventure. When we think of treasure chests, we think pirates. We think explorers. Adventure. He's so excited by this that a split second and you were away, intoxicated. Now this is an interesting one, intoxicated, because this verb here, it suggests that he doesn't really know what he's doing because he's drunk on it. Does he know what's in store? She certainly doesn't think so, otherwise she wouldn't use the word intoxicated. And that's where that part of the story finishes. Okay? He's gone. She's walked him to the front door. He's gone. He's gone, bye mum, see ya. See you when I'm on leave. Big smile on his face, hippie skipping. And now she's alone. After you'd gone, I went into your bedroom, released a songbird from its cage. Now this line is really ambiguous because we don't know how soon after he's gone. I'll change my colour so you can see the difference. Okay. But it's interesting it's in the same stanza, which implies, again, it's this idea of fuzzy time. Felt like time. After you'd gone, I went into your bedroom. Gone, it was also an interesting word as well. Gone could mean left, but gone, people refer to people who've died as being gone. Okay? We don't know, and that's what ambiguous means. It means we don't know. But this released a songbird from its cage. Now, this one's a really interesting one because this is quite clearly metaphorical. Now, my personal feeling on this, and this is my reading of it, is when I think songbird and cage, I think voice and ribs. I think she's gone into his bedroom and she's screaming. I think she's crying. I think she's letting all her emotions out. But that's my thoughts. Because I think rib cage and I think voice when it comes to songbird. I don't know. What do you think? Let me know. Sound like Mr. Bruff in his comments. Let me know what you think in the comments. Okay. Later, a single dove flew from the pear tree, and this is where it has led me. Now, doves. Doves are a universal symbol of several things. They are a universal symbol of peace, of hope, but also mourning, which is another hint that he might be dead. Okay? And this is where it has led me. Skirting the churchyard walls. So she's followed the dove, and she's going around the edges of the churchyard. Okay? Now, skirting is quite an interesting one, because again, that's another military term. Don't know whether any of you guys who play Call of Duty or anything like that have ever referred to being, skirting around the edges of things. Okay. And then we've gone from that into this, skirting the churchyard walls, my stomach busy, making tucks, darts, pleats. These words are all dressmaking terminology again. Tucks, darts, pleats. So again, we've got military right up against, so it's juxtaposed with this domestic imagery. It's kind of like that oxymoron of military family, military wife. The minute a member of your family is in the military, your whole family is in the military. It's not just that one person. And I think that's what Jane Weir is trying to get across here, that the idea that, once someone is a soldier in your family, the whole of your family is involved. And that means the whole of your family mourns, the whole of your family cheers when there's a success. It's very touching, actually. And then we find out that this, sorry, I'm going fast because I'm running out of time. Hatless, without a winter coat or reinforcements of scarf, gloves. So we've got those kind of clothing bits there, more of that domesticity, but reinforcements, again, something else that's military. So yeah, military terms are juxtaposed with that domestic imagery, that idea that she is both military and domestic now because her son is in the army, or was in the army, because at this point it is very ambiguous as to whether he's alive or dead, whether he's literally just gone off or whether the time has gone past to the point that we're now at much, much later. And yeah, this last stanza here really kicks it into that, is he dead? Is he not dead? I could sit and argue with you about this all day. Myself personally, I don't know. I don't think he is. But at the same point, there are bits here that suggest that maybe if he isn't dead, she's being a little bit overdramatic. But anywho, we'll get on with it. On reaching the top of the hill, I traced the inscriptions on the war memorial, leaned against it like a wishbone. Okay, so she's walked to the top of the hill and she's looking at the war memorial. Now, do you remember how I said that war memorials are where you expect to see poppies? Because nobody really goes to individual war graves because they're quite personal. This is a memorial, it's general, as opposed to personal. which is why I'm not sure that he is dead, because myself personally, I feel that if she were actually going to his memorial, she'd go to his grave, because at the beginning she's talking about personal graves. But then we could also add to that the reason he's in the war memorial is because his body hasn't been found. Because that's one of the reasons those war memorials exist, is because so many soldiers, their bodies were never found. If you go over to Ypres and go to Belgium, you will see gravestones with 4 names written on them. And the reason that there's 4 names there is because they couldn't work out which body was which. Seriously, if you ever get the chance to go to Belgium, go to Ypres, go and see the war graves, go. It is one of the most thought-provoking and gut-wrenching experiences of my life. And it makes this stuff make so much more sense. So the inscriptions on the war memorial, she traces them with her fingers, okay? So this is a very tactile image. Good thing she didn't have her gloves with her. Sorry, I'm getting a bit silly. It's all about what she feels with her hands. Leaned against it like a wishbone. Now this is interesting, okay? Because wishbone, we would think is hopeful, but she's leaning against it as if she's given up. So it's almost oxymoron. Because she's not hopeful at all, but a wishbone is hopeful. She's disillusioned, she's given up. And then she looks at the dove. The dove pulled freely against the sky. Now, again, remember, peace, hope, mourning. Okay? But it's pulling. It's trying to get away. Peace is trying to move on. Mourning is trying to move on. And it's currently having difficulty doing so. An ornamental stitch. Obviously, more of that domesticity. I listened, hoping to hear your playground voice catching on the wind. Now, that's where we get that really last line of whether he's actually dead or not, because it's your playground voice. She's longing to hear him as a child. Okay, now the implications of that line, there's quite a lot there, because it's a playground voice. She wants to hear as a child. Now, logically, if she's missing him as an adult, she'd want him back as an adult. But instead, she wants him back as a child. And when we think about what being a child means, she wants to be able to take care of him. To shield him. But it could also be because he's never coming back as an adult. Okay, I don't know. We don't know, that's the whole point. Okay, so pretty emotional poem, but let's have a look at the structure. So we've already talked about that enjambment, the idea of maybe the enjambment or the structure linking to taking breaths as she's trying to be strong. Okay. And we talked about the idea that with the the stanza structure it is regular, but it's not regimented. Which I find quite interesting, because she's a military mother. It's a military family. So it's regular but not regimented because she's not a soldier. Okay. We've got a lot of juxtaposition of military versus domestic. And the poem itself seems to run in a kind of chronological order. There are lots of big time jump gaps, but it still runs from beginning to end. Okay, so we've got our time jumps, and the last thing here, it's deliberately ambiguous. Am I going to fit ambiguous in here? I think I am. Yeah, I fit it in. Okay, so this poem, it's an interesting one because it is meant to be deliberately ambiguous, and it sounds really personal, but Jane Weir herself, she's lived in conflict-ridden environments. She did live in Ireland at points, and she's obviously been around when conflict has been going on. There is always conflict going on in this world. There has not been a day without conflict for a very long time. There's a conflict going on right now. And it's meant to be ambiguous so that it speaks to the families of military from across time. And that's what I think makes it so powerful. In terms of writing about this for an exam, it's brilliant for writing about the effects of conflict on civilians. It's brilliant for writing about about memory, about family, about war, obviously, conflict, obviously. It's brilliant to compare to things like Bayonet Charge or Kamikaze or War Photographer or Remains. It's an interesting one to look at for things like exposure. Have I said exposure? I can't remember. But I think the key thing with this is because it's such an obviously war poem, it needs to be treated from that angle. So I would look at it and treat it like I would treat Exposure or Bayonet Charge or Kamikaze, far more so than I would treat it like Charge of the Light Brigade, which is very clearly balladic story. Anyway, those are my thoughts. You may disagree with some of what I've said here. Have a look at the sheets that you've got with it. Give them a go. Let me know how you get on with it. It's a really powerful poem, and it's a great one to talk about, and there are some fantastic quotations in there that are so easy to get ingrained in your head. Spasms of paper red, yellow bias binding, flattened rolled, turned into felt, gelled blackthorns of your hair. They're really, really juicy quotations that you can get a lot of information out of. Okay? See you soon, guys. Bye.